Okay, we are recording. And tonight I have the pleasure and honor of introducing our speaker, Marinda Freeman. She is a licensed spiritual counselor. And her talk tonight is Honoring Grief During an Apocalypse, COVID, fires, and so much more. How do we address the loss we have all been experiencing? Not only the deaths of so many, but also restraints on our ability to move about freely, the missed opportunities to be with our loved ones, both near and far, or to simply give and receive a hug. Where do we even begin to mourn? How do we start? There is a gaping hole in our society. We don't talk about death. The reality of these permanent departures affects the baby boomer generation disproportionately with the passing of parents, spouses, friends, siblings, and in some instances, children. Many people today do not have a traditional or formal way to address grief. Yet most are experiencing the death of a loved one. They crave emotional support and are seeking ways to work through their grief and loss. Creating rituals is one way to assist in grieving. Even the known rituals such as funerals, wakes, and memorials have drastically changed with this pandemic, however. So tonight, Marinda is going to share an exploration of grief and mourning and what actions we can take to soothe our hearts and minds. Yes, it can feel overwhelming at times. Taking one small step at a time can make a difference. She will share with us how to create an altar for mourning and healing, and you are invited to share in an evening of love, hope, support, and inspiration. Just a little bit about Marinda. She is a lifelong spiritual student of many religions and disciplines, and a licensed spiritual counselor and teacher for over 20 years. Her book, The Grief Train, A Healing Journey of Love, Loss, and Renewal, was the result of her personal exploration of grief after her husband died unexpectedly of a heart attack. She started to write a blog about her process and discovered that friends found solace and inspiration in reading her blog. Marinda wrote her book in order to provide a gentle, spiritual, non-religious approach to grief as a way to help others like herself. Please help me welcome Marinda Freeman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andrea. I'm honored to share with you some things that I've learned and what I put down in my book, which is behind me, and I'll just hold it up once there, The Grief Train, A Healing Journey of Love, Loss, and Renewal. I always forget to do that. Title is about apocalypse, and I want to just start by saying that if apocalypse, the literal translation, is uncovering or lifting of the veil, meaning that hidden things are brought to the surface and therefore revealed. So I think that's an interesting thing for us to realize, that it's not what we think it is, which is a lot of things in life. So I'd like everybody to take a deep breath, to just land, because I'm going to talk about things that maybe wouldn't feel as comfortable, but I want you to feel comfortable and settle in and listen. And I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to talk about it. So first, I'm going to clarify what's the distinction between grief and mourning. As mentioned, I'm going to talk about what to say and not to say to people when they are experiencing loss. And then I'm going to share some things about altars and show you some pictures. And then I'll tell you why I wrote this book and why I called it The Grief Train. So the distinction between grief and mourning. Grief is the emotion that'll just wash over you, unexpected or whatever, it'll just rise up and show up. Mourning is the action, whether that's creating an altar or having a memorial or a funeral or gathering with others, even via Zoom. Mourning and grieving are the actions, grief is the emotion. All right, so what to say and not to say. Don't say, just get over it. Aren't you done with that by now? Time to move on. That's the last thing someone wants to hear when they're grieving, because frankly, there is no right way or wrong way to grieve, and there is no time frame. I've had one woman, I did my own little personal research, and one woman said after 3 years after her husband died, she was ready to move on. Another woman, it was 5 years. My friend's mother said she took 7 years to do anything after her husband died. So it's about having compassion and being with someone, spending time with them, allowing them to share whatever memories they have, and just patience and compassion for them in their process. So I wanted to read a couple passages from my book that address this. I started out my blog writing about flowers, and then near the end of the book, I wrote this chapter called "Why Do We Send Flowers?" And I responded to a recent New York Times Modern Love column where they said, "Why do we send flowers? To make up for what is intangible, those feelings we can't hold in our hands and present as a gift to our loved ones? And why is it that the placeholders we choose, the dozen red roses, the fragrant white lilies, the long stem French tulips, are so fleeting? Hold on to them for too long, and you end up with a mess of petals, pollen, and foul smelling water." This article was about working in a flower shop, the stories people share when they buy flowers, and the variety of messages accompanying cards. This note was unusually honest. "Cards and flowers seem so lame when someone dies, but we are thinking of you and want you to know." This definitely says what is true. We want to send our love and heartfelt caring to friends and family when they experience the loss of a loved one. And it is hard to know what to say. Flowers say it for us, though not usually with such a direct message included. For me, the beauty of flowers also represents the beauty of life. They are alive, beautiful, and ephemeral, a reminder to honor the preciousness of life in each and every moment. And I want to read this in the next chapter about what is the crux of grief. The crux of grief is a process that takes time, and we get signs to help us along from life as well as sometimes from the deceased. The change from having that person we love at hand and then gone is the hardest part to adjust to. As the author Julie Meyerson quotes in her article, "Loss, isn't that the hardest lesson of human existence? The finality of losing someone you love, of having them fall right out of your life forever. The cold and terrible permanence of it. And yet, I have discovered that what lives on is the love. The love never dies or is lost. We hold it in our heart always. When we experience a loss, our heart is cracked open. And just like Leonard Cohen says, that's how the light gets in." I just heard Annie Lamott speak the other day about grief, and I just thought what she said was so important to share. She said that crying is the way home to my soul while there is only one of us. We cannot be afraid of tears. They are good and necessary. When you come out of a river of tears, you wash yourself clean. And that's part of the work of grieving, is that you have to dive deep into that grieving, to feel your feelings and to allow yourself to come back out. If you're stuck and refusing to address that, then you can't move forward. So it's really about feeling those feelings and diving deep into them to come back out. So I wanted to share, I'll find out where I share the screen here. I wanted to show you some pictures about altars. So I started at the bottom, so I got to go back to the top. Okay, so I didn't realize that an altar was something I'd created all my life, whereas creating beauty and focus of beauty in a space. But altars are a way to focus our attention. So, and they evolve over time. So here is an altar that has the Mount Tam in the background. That's very difficult to see. And I had broken my wrist, so my friends created this little artwork. There's a doll's arm in there for my wrist to heal. But candles, crystals, flowers, plants, whatever is meaningful to you, found objects, then it changes. Here I have American Indian medicine bags, medicine pouches, and these are bags from Afghanistan. I have a feather. Things are always evolving. I always have to have crystal balls. You never know when you're going to need one. This one was really so I could look at my beautiful daughter's face every day. But again, candles, flowers, a plant, green, someplace to focus my attention, and to look at this Buddha, which just reminds me of the spirit that we are always within. This is the altar I created when our cat was put down, Claire, and I found this little sculpture with a cat with wings. Animals are just as important loved ones in our family as our human family and friends. And so it's important to acknowledge that loss. And I put that right in the center where my daughter and I could both acknowledge and experience and focus our grief for her loss. This was the altar I made for my husband's second anniversary, and I created a ritual with my friend Catherine, who's also a minister. I had pictures of my husband and his sisters, he and I. I had his wine, goat cheese and crackers, and some apricot chutney, and my friend and I toasted him and shared fond memories of him as a way to acknowledge his passing after 2 years. So I had a friend whose husband died, and she read the book and she had never thought of creating an altar, so she made one. She sent me a picture, and I said, oh, it would be good if you would light a candle, if you have a candle. She sent me another picture recently with a candle, and she changed some of the pictures, and she said, I light the candle every night. So it's just beautiful ways to remember. But Day of the Dead is another altar. Here we are coming up to that, the end of the month. It's the time of the thinning of the veils, and here there's all this offering of food to honor the ancestors. I just think it's such a beautiful tradition. Here is another one that with many pictures of ancestors and family that have passed. Beautiful. And then most recently, here we are, Supreme Court with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's chair draped in black drape. Now this comes from traditions in the 1800s. This was 1873 when there was the passing of a justice, Chief Justice, and they draped the chairs. This is what they did, and I love that they're continuing this for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You know, back in the 1800s, there was a lot of etiquette for what you did for mourning, and people would put this black crepe on their front door to announce that someone had died. So this brings me to an exhibit I saw at the New York Metropolitan Costume Institute called Death Becomes Her, A Century of Mourning Attire. And it's something perhaps we can learn a little bit or have inspiration of what we can do for our own mourning rituals. Women wore black, 2 to 4 years. They were the ones that expressed the grief for the family, so they were responsible for this. But, you know, putting on black every day. I have a friend who wore black for the 2 years after her husband died as her own mourning ritual. Here's some more. And it's so hard to see all of the fabrications. They're dressed in the styles of the time, but this woman, I have a close up here. You can see the beautiful fringe on the shawl and the moire. Beautiful clothes, but again, all black. And here is with a veil. Queen Victoria, when her husband died in 1861, she wore black for the rest of her life until she died in 1901. And this was very much a tradition, but this reminds me of Jackie Kennedy when JFK died, harking back to these rituals of mourning that she expressed. This is a bride in the Civil War, and because of all the death, she wore middle mourning. There was heavy mourning, black, middle mourning, moving into gray, and light mourning into lighter gray and mauve. So people knew where you were in the mourning process, which we don't have today. We have to sort of create it for ourselves. So here is evening gowns with black for heavy mourning and mauve for light mourning. Again, beautiful, but they're in mourning, who knew? And then at the turn of the century, Gibson girl, again, sort of lighter mourning, but a way to acknowledge what we don't have now. So in my book, I have a recipe of altars, and you can look at it and see, but as I showed you, there's a lot of similar elements no matter what, and have a candle. And I wanted to share why I called my book The Grief Train, which I reflected on the fact that when you're in a process, you don't really know what it is until you get to the end of the journey and you can look back and go, what was that? And so I realized it was like a train, that I'm sitting at the station not knowing that there's a train. And I'm going to read from the last chapter in my book called The Grief Train. And I talk about bereavement, which is another word for mourning. Bereavement is a time of mourning, although there's no rushing it. It takes years, really. It has its own schedule. The grief train doesn't have a schedule. It can show up in any time and surprise us. That wave of grief requires us to feel our feelings when it arrives at our station. We are mourning for being deprived of our loved one, being robbed of that person in our life. They are taken away and we don't see them again. They aren't available to talk to spend time with anymore. That's the hard part, the hurt part. And it takes time to heal, or at least to feel less tender about the loss. It's not something that can be analyzed or thought through. It touches our heart, our emotion. Emotion is energy in motion, like waves on the ocean. We can't control the waves, and we can't control the waves of emotion. Bereavement is a station I can be residing in, or not even notice I am still there after so long. And surprise, the grief train will stop at my station. I believe the work is to be willing to greet that train, to honor and acknowledge it, and to sit with it when it arrives. So I wanted to just mention that I wrote this book because other people had given me feedback that it helped them. So if there is someone that you know that would be helped by this book, I am offering a special New of Marin discount, and you can email me at marinda@thegrieftrain.com, or just look me up on the website and I'll give you more of that information. And I just wanted to close before we have any questions that I just want everyone to remember that in these trying times, all we have is today. We never know when that train will show up. So take the opportunity to appreciate each other, to be with each other, and be present. Each person is a gift. Life is fragile. Life goes quickly. Value it. Show love to everyone you encounter. You never know how a small gesture can make a difference to someone. To make it easier to beam love to every situation, I remember what Mother Teresa said. There goes another child of God in a very interesting disguise. So now I'm open to any questions you might have, and I didn't open the chat to see. Is there anything?
Go ahead, Dr. Linda, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, Marinda, thank you very much. You handled that so organized, such a tender topic. I've lost my older sister and my brother, so it certainly brings it back up. And I just wanted to share that from a Taoist perspective, that courage, we can get buried in our grief too, that courage is the virtue antidote for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's awesome. Did anyone else have something they wanted a question? Nicola, go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just wanted to thank you too, because I shouldn't have said anything. My mum passed in August. I don't think but I've really been diving into the emotions because I'm good at that, I mean, I'm all about emotions. So, but sure, it can just take, I'd go into Whole Foods sometimes, like there's a particular 6-week period, I think, where it was the hardest. And I remember just being in Whole Foods and suddenly my eyes welling up with tears, and like now even, I thought I was going to speak quite calmly,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, just you're doing important work, and thank you.
Thank you. Be gentle with yourself, my dear.
Yes, I have been, and
Good.
and I would just like to say that two things have helped me a lot, apart from the ability to dive into emotions, and be comfortable with them, not be afraid of them. Is one that I have communicated often with my mother, and and a friend actually texted me and said, your mother is just a heartbeat away, just if you call out to her and she'll be there. And it's been so true. And I've had conversations with her, and it's actually been really delightful, that part of it, and such a relief that we are continuing our relationship. So, and the other thing is that my creative projects and the things that I'm passionate about and that are purposeful in my life, when I was ready to, I got involved in those again, and that really helped me, to dive into something that I feel passionate about and excited about. And so all those 3 things have helped me in my process. So that's helpful to anybody.
Good. Yeah. I used a medium, and I found that very helpful because I don't get that direct connection, but I did get messages that my husband was present at certain times. And I think it's, they're fine. They've just jettisoned their earth suit and they're good, and we're left to the change. And so we're the ones that have to adjust to the change and be with our emotions and our feelings and honor them.
Yes. Yeah. And they love us. I mean, if they
it's all love.
It's
all love. Yeah.
Did anyone else have a question?
Thank you.
Dr. Wendy, go for it. And then Terry.
So thank you so much, Marinda. That was beautiful. Really, really good job. And I just wanted to share, I have a client I'm working with right now who he lost his mom unexpectedly not very long ago. And I've been reaching out to him, and when I finally connected and we had a session, he couldn't deal with it and he left. And that's, I'm like, oh, wow, that's challenging. Some people just are it's too hard, I guess. So I'm just wondering what, I want to be there and be supportive, and not that you're going to have an answer, but that's tough when there's this just unwillingness to, and maybe it's just too soon. I don't know.
Well, they're not ready, and so it's more a matter of just being present rather than any pushing to any conclusion or any direction, to just be present and just to allow them to speak and be with them. I mean, that's the best gift you can give them.
Yeah. So I will reach out again in a gentle way.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Go ahead, Terry.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed about losing someone or having grief is that along with being painful, it's a very heart opening, in a way, a heartbreaking experience. And if we can simply remember that we're just all in different resonances, the person who's passed over or the animal that's passed over is really just sitting in another resonance, like another channel.
Mhm.
And what happens when our heart opens is that well, first it breaks and that hurts. But then as it opens, you actually find yourself communicating across these resonances. And some people do it by hearing things or feeling things. It's as unique as each of us. But the ones that we've lost are really there. So I really so appreciate that you're reminding people of that.
Yeah, I think it's when we think of them and bring them to our heart that they are present.
Exactly.
Because it's that love connection that they are, there's no distance, there's no time in that connection of love. Thank you.
One more, Ilani, go for it.
Thank you, Marinda. That was so wonderful, and also brings the discussion about the death process and death out into the open so we can share our experiences with one another and not feel alone. And there is no time and space on the other side, because my grandmother died, I think, about 35 years ago. And I just had a dream about her 2 nights ago, that she came and gave me some information that I was really very grateful to receive. And so it's really about that heart opening and that being open to that resonance and that miracle that there really is no separation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Susan, if it's real quick, go for it. Just need to unmute.
I just wanted to say that was very soulful, but I think we're all grieving. What we're grieving is the lack of normal in the pandemic. I think we're grieving the loss of our democracy, which seems to be hanging by a thread. So I just encourage everyone to vote. This is so important. It really portends the future for children, grandchildren, and our old age. So please vote. I think we're all in a state of loss and grief.
Thank you.
We are. Yes.
Great reminder, Susan.
Yes, that is something that we're all having to address. Seems my book is more relevant than I could have imagined with all that we've had to let go in this time, and to just sit with that and bring it into your heart and know that things are evolving. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And to call everybody in all of those states where the election's really kind of on the line, and call them. That's the most important thing we can do right now, I think.
I'm going to end recording since it seems like we're pivoting. Thank you, Marinda. That was so amazing.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you.
All right.